The city of New York in the 1960s was a place of iron and concrete, a sprawling labyrinth where millions lived side by side yet remained total strangers. On the night of March 13, 1964, in a quiet pocket of Queens known as Kew Gardens, the thin veil of neighborly safety was about to be torn away. This was the night Catherine "Kitty" Vance became a name etched into the dark history of American psychology. It was 3:15 in the morning. The air was a damp, biting cold that smelled of salt and wet pavement. Kitty was driving her white Fiat home after a long, exhausting double shift as a bar manager. She was 28 years old, full of life, and well known in the neighborhood for her quick wit and bright smile. She parked her car at the corner of 4th Street, about 100 feet from the entrance to her apartment building. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, the rhythmic click of her heels was the only sound in the frozen air. But Kitty was not alone. Behind a row of parked cars, a man named Winston Moseley watched her. He was not a drunken vagrant or a desperate thief. He was a professional, a family man with 2 children and no criminal record. Yet, deep inside him sat a cold, predatory urge. He had spent the night driving around looking for a victim, and in the lonely walk of Kitty Vance, he found exactly what he was searching for. Moseley stepped out from the shadows. Kitty noticed him almost immediately. She quickened her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wasn't far from the building entrance, but as she reached the corner under a flickering street lamp, Moseley caught her. He didn't say a word. He simply drew a knife and struck. The first scream that tore from Kitty's throat was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. It was loud enough to pierce through the brick walls and double-paned glass of the surrounding apartment complexes. "Oh my God! He stabbed me! Help me! Please, somebody help me!" she shrieked. In the buildings above, the world began to wake up. Lights flickered on in bedroom windows. Curtains were twitched aside. Behind those windows, 38 people were now watching. One neighbor, a man named Robert, opened his window and shouted down into the dark, telling the attacker to leave the girl alone. It was a half-hearted attempt at intervention, but it worked, temporarily. Startled by the human voice and the sudden appearance of lit windows, Moseley panicked and fled toward his car. Kitty lay on the cold ground, bleeding from her back. She looked up at the windows, seeing the silhouettes of her neighbors. She felt a surge of hope. Surely, the police were on their way. Surely, someone was coming down the stairs to help her. But as the minutes ticked by, the silence returned to 4th Street. One by one, the lights in the windows went out. Robert closed his window. Others went back to bed, convincing themselves it was just a lover's quarrel or a drunken dispute. Inside the apartments, a terrifying psychological phenomenon was unfolding, the diffusion of responsibility. Everyone who saw Kitty believed that because so many others were watching, someone else must have already called the police. They felt safe in their numbers, not realizing that their numbers were the very reason no one was acting. Kitty, struggling for breath and losing blood, managed to get to her feet. She began to crawl toward the back of the building, trying to reach a hidden entrance that led to the safety of the interior hallway. She left a dark trail on the sidewalk. She reached the hallway and collapsed against the door, her fingers fumbling with her keys. Moseley, meanwhile, had not left the area. He had driven around the block, watching from a distance. When he saw that no sirens appeared and no police cars arrived, he realized something that chilled even his cold heart: the neighbors were going to let him finish. He parked his car, walked back to the building, and followed the trail of blood. He found Kitty in the hallway, trapped and helpless. The second attack was more brutal than the first. Kitty screamed again, but this time she was inside the hallway. The sound was muffled by the walls. A neighbor named Carl, whose apartment was directly above the hallway, stood by his door and listened. He heard the struggle. He heard the final, desperate pleas Kitty made for her mother. He stood there for 15 minutes, his hand inches from the telephone, and did nothing. He was afraid, he later said. He didn't want to get involved. By the time Mosley finally walked away for the last time, Kitty Vance was barely holding on to life. It wasn't until 3:50 a.m., nearly 40 minutes after the first attack, that a neighbor finally called the police. Even then, he didn't call immediately. He first called a friend to ask for advice, then crossed over a roof to another neighbor's apartment to make the call. He didn't want the police to know it was him who had reported it. When the police and ambulance arrived, it was too late. Kitty died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. The investigation that followed would change the city forever. Detective Miller, tasked with the case, began a door-to-door canvass of the neighborhood. He expected to find that no one had seen anything. Instead, he found the 38 witnesses. The discovery was a national scandal. Headlines across the country screamed about the apathy of New York. How could 38 good people watch a woman be murdered over the course of half an hour and not pick up the phone? The answer was a grim reflection of modern society. The witnesses weren't monsters, they were ordinary people paralyzed by fear and the assumption that they weren't responsible. Winston Mosley was eventually caught after committing another robbery. He confessed to Kitty's murder with a terrifying lack of emotion. He told the detectives that he knew the neighbors wouldn't do anything because he could see them watching him. He felt as though he had an audience, and that audience had given him their silent permission to kill. The trial was a media circus, but the real legacy of Kitty Vance was what happened afterward. Her death forced the United States to realize that the emergency reporting system was broken. At the time, if you wanted the police, you had to dial 0 for the operator or know the specific number for your local precinct. In the chaos of the Kitty Vance murder, people didn't know who to call. This led directly to the creation of the 911 system, a universal, 3-digit number that anyone could call in a crisis. Furthermore, social psychologists began to study the bystander effect. They proved through experiments that the more people who witness an emergency, the less likely any single person is to help. In a crowd, our sense of personal responsibility is divided by the number of people present. On 4th Street, responsibility was divided by 38, leaving each person with almost no feeling of obligation to act. Today, if you walk down 4th Street in Kew Gardens, the red brick buildings still stand. The windows still look down on the sidewalk where Kitty fought for her life. There is a small plaque, but the real memorial is the 911 system used by millions every day. The story of the silent witness is a haunting reminder that the greatest threat to a community isn't always the predator in the shadows. Sometimes, it is the silence of the people behind the glass. It is a story that asks every one of us a difficult question: if we heard that scream in the night, would we be the one to pick up the phone, or would we be the 39th witness? Kitty Vance didn't just die from a knife wound. She died from a lack of air, the air of compassion that a community is supposed to provide. Her story serves as a permanent warning that in the face of evil, silence is not neutral. Silence is a choice, and on 4th Street, that choice was fatal. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. The wind howled like a living thing across the frozen slopes of the Ural Mountains. It wasn't just cold, it was a kind of cold that crept into the bones, a cold that silenced thoughts and numbed the will to survive. In the winter of 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out on an expedition into this unforgiving wilderness. They were young, strong, and trained to endure the harshest conditions nature could throw at them. They had maps, equipment, and confidence. What they didn't have was any idea that they were walking toward one of the most mysterious tragedies in human history. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student known for his intelligence, discipline, and leadership. His team consisted of fellow students and graduates, each one skilled in skiing, survival, and mountaineering. This was not a reckless adventure. It was a carefully planned journey, a test of endurance meant to earn them top-level certification in trekking. Their destination was a remote mountain in the northern Urals, a place known to the local Monsey people as Kolet-Syakhl, Dead Mountain. The name should have been a warning. The expedition began smoothly. Spirits were high. The group joked, sang, and documented their journey with photographs and diary entries. Snow covered the landscape like an endless white ocean, broken only by dark lines of trees and jagged ridges. The hikers moved steadily, pulling their gear on sleds, carving paths through deep drifts. Each night, they set up camp, cooked simple meals, and rested in their shared tent, a long canvas structure designed to hold all 9 of them. But as they pushed deeper into the mountains, conditions worsened. The wind grew stronger, the temperature dropped further, and visibility became unpredictable. On January 31st, they reached the edge of a highland area leading toward their final ascent. It was here that things began to shift, subtly at first, almost unnoticed. The next day, February 1st, they attempted to cross the mountain slope. But poor weather and strong winds forced them off course. Instead of descending into a safer, forested valley, they made a decision that would prove fatal. They set up camp on the exposed slope of Kolat itself. It was a strange choice. Experienced hikers usually avoid camping on open slopes, especially in extreme weather. The forest below offered shelter from the wind, firewood, and better protection. Yet for reasons still debated, they chose to stay where they were. Perhaps they didn't want to lose altitude. Perhaps they believed they could manage. Or perhaps, something else influenced that decision. They pitched their tent on the incline, anchoring it into the snow. Inside, they laid out their gear, removed their outer layers, and prepared for the night. The wind outside screamed across the mountain. The darkness closed in. And then, something happened. No one knows exactly what it was. But sometime during the night, all 9 hikers suddenly fled their tent. Not through the entrance, but by cutting their way out from the inside. The canvas was slashed open. From within. It was not a careful exit. It was a desperate escape. They left behind their boots, their coats, their supplies. They ran into the freezing night, barefoot, half-dressed, into temperatures that could kill within minutes. Why? What could have terrified them so completely that they would abandon safety and run into certain death? Days turned into weeks before a search party was organized. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, concern began to grow. Eventually, rescuers set out to retrace their path. What they found would only deepen the mystery. The tent was discovered first. It was partially buried in snow, still standing, but damaged. The investigators noted that it had been cut open from the inside. Inside, everything was left behind as if the occupants had vanished in an instant. Shoes were neatly placed. Clothes remained folded. Food and personal belongings were untouched. It didn't look like a normal evacuation. It looked like panic. Following the trail away from the tent, the searchers found footprints in the snow. Bare feet. Socks. A single boot here and there. The prints led downhill, toward the forest. But there was something strange about them. They weren't chaotic. They weren't the marks of people running for their lives. They were calm. Measured. As if the group had walked away, not fled. This contradiction would haunt the investigation. The first bodies were found near a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest. 2 hikers lay there, barefoot, wearing only undergarments. Their skin was burned and torn, their hands injured as if they had tried to climb the tree. Nearby, remnants of a small fire suggested they had attempted to survive the cold. Between the tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were discovered. These individuals appeared to have been trying to return to the tent. Their positions, frozen mid-movement, told a silent story of desperation. They had turned back, perhaps realizing the danger, but they never made it. The remaining 4 hikers were not found until months later, buried under deep snow in a ravine further into the forest. Their condition was far more disturbing. These bodies showed severe internal injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, yet there were no external wounds to match the force required. It was as if an immense pressure had been applied from within. One woman was missing her tongue. Others had missing eyes. Some clothing showed traces of radiation. It didn't make sense. The official investigation struggled to provide answers. There were no signs of a struggle. No evidence of an attack by another group. No indication of an avalanche large enough to explain the behavior. The injuries didn't match typical survival scenarios. In the end, the case was closed with a vague conclusion. The cause of death was an unknown compelling force. It was a phrase that explained nothing. And so, the theories began. Some believed it was an avalanche, that a sudden movement of snow had frightened the hikers, causing them to cut their way out and flee. But the slope angle was not steep enough for a typical avalanche. The tent was still partially intact. And the footprints remained visible, undisturbed. Others suggested infrasound, a phenomenon where wind passing over certain shapes can create low-frequency vibrations that affect the human mind. It could cause panic, anxiety, even hallucinations. Perhaps the hikers experienced an overwhelming sense of dread, forcing them to abandon their shelter. There were theories of secret military tests. The presence of radiation fueled speculation that experimental weapons had been tested in the area. Strange lights were reportedly seen in the sky around that time. Could the hikers have witnessed something they weren't supposed to see? And then there were the darker theories. Something unknown. Something not of this world. Something that moved silently through the snow, unseen but powerful. But there was never any proof. In 2020, Russian authorities reopened the case and concluded that an avalanche was the most likely explanation. A small slab of snow, they said, could have shifted under the tent, creating the impression of imminent danger. The hikers, fearing a larger collapse, cut their way out and retreated. Disoriented in the darkness and cold, they succumbed to hypothermia and injury. It was a logical explanation. But not everyone was convinced. Because even with this conclusion, the questions remain. Why didn't they return to the tent once the danger passed? Why were some injuries so severe? Why was there radiation? Why did they leave so calmly, yet die so violently? The Dyatlov Pass incident is more than a tragedy. It is a puzzle frozen in time. A moment where logic fails and mystery takes hold. 9 lives ended on that mountain. Their final moments are lost to the wind, buried beneath layers of snow and silence. And somewhere in the endless white of Kholat cycle, the truth still waits.
Some places are forgotten for a reason, not because they are empty, but because something still lives there. It started as a simple trip, a break from the city, a few days away from noise, from stress, from everything. Daniel parked the car slowly near the old wooden cabin. "This is it," he said, looking around. "Peaceful, quiet, perfect." Ryan stepped out, stretching his arms. "Perfect," he laughed. "Bro, this place looks like a murder documentary waiting to happen." Emma stepped out next, her eyes slowly scanning the forest. Tall trees, dark shadows. Too quiet. "I don't like this place," she said softly. Daniel sighed. "Emma, you always say that," he replied. "It's just a cabin, nothing else." Sophia stepped out last. She didn't speak. She just looked at the cabin. Long. Focused. Almost familiar. "You've been here before?" Daniel asked casually. Sophia blinked, then shook her head. "No," she said quietly, "but it feels like I have." Silence. A cold wind passed through the trees. Ryan clapped his hands. "All right. Enough creepy vibes," he said, forcing a laugh. "Let's get inside before I start imagining ghosts." The cabin door creaked as Daniel pushed it open. The smell hit them immediately. Old wood. Dust. Moist air. "Damn," Ryan muttered. "This place hasn't been cleaned in years." Inside, the cabin was dark. Broken furniture. Old walls. And something else. Something heavy. Emma stepped inside slowly, her heart beating faster. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Daniel frowned. "Feel what?" She hesitated. "I don't know," she said. "It just feels wrong." Ryan laughed. You watch too many horror movies, he said. Relax, it's just your imagination. But Sophia didn't laugh. She walked deeper inside, her fingers slowly brushing the walls, like she was searching for something. Guys, she said quietly. They turned. What? Daniel asked. Sophia pointed toward the floor. There's a basement, a wooden trapdoor. Old. Locked. Daniel walked closer. Probably just storage, he said. Nothing interesting. But Emma shook her head. No, she whispered. Don't open it. Ryan smirked. Oh, come on. This is exactly why we should open it, he said. Hidden basement? That's adventure. Daniel hesitated, then grabbed the handle. Relax, it's just an old cabin, he said. He pulled. The door opened slowly. Darkness. Complete darkness. Cold air rushed out. Emma stepped back immediately. No, close it, she said quickly. I don't like this. But Ryan grabbed a flashlight. Too late, he said with a grin. Let's see what's down there. They walked down the stairs slowly, each step echoing, louder than it should. The air felt colder, heavier. Daniel turned on his phone light. Stay close, he said. The basement was small. Stone walls, dirt floor. And in the center, something was lying there, wrapped in cloth. What is that? Emma whispered. Ryan stepped closer. Only one way to find out. He pulled the cloth away and froze. A book, he said. Old. Black. Covered in strange symbols. Not a normal book. Sophia stepped forward slowly. Her eyes locked on it. That's not just a book, she whispered. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Sophia's voice dropped. It's something you're not supposed to read. Ryan laughed again. Oh, great. Cursed book cliché, he said, picking it up. Let's see what kind of horror story we're dealing with. Put it down. Emma shouted suddenly. Everyone froze. Her voice shaking. Don't touch it, she said, stepping back. Please, just leave it. Ryan looked at her. Relax, he said. It's just an old book. He opened it. The pages were filled with symbols. Strange drawings. Faces twisted in pain. Bodies torn apart. What the hell? Daniel muttered. Sophia whispered. Close it. Ryan smirked. Or, he said slowly, we read it. Silence. Emma shook her head violently. No, don't. But Ryan started reading. The words didn't sound like any language. Not English. Not anything human. Something ancient. Something wrong. The air changed. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. The lights flickered. The walls seemed to breathe. Ryan, stop, Daniel said, his voice uneasy now. But Ryan didn't stop. His voice grew louder, more intense, like something was forcing him. Ryan, stop. Emma screamed. And suddenly, he stopped. Silence. Heavy. Dead. Ryan blinked. What just happened? He whispered. The basement felt colder. Much colder. Sophia slowly turned her head toward the darkness behind them. Her voice barely came out. We shouldn't have done that. Daniel frowned. Why? Sophia's eyes widened. Because in the darkness, something moved. Not fast. Not loud. Just enough to be seen. A shape. Standing. Watching. And then, it smiled. Something will come in. The basement felt different now. Heavier. Darker. Like the air itself was watching them. Daniel stepped forward slowly. Did you guys see that? He asked quietly. Ryan looked confused. See what? He said, still holding the book. Emma's voice trembled. There was something there. Sophia didn't speak. Her eyes were still fixed on the darkness. Close the book, she whispered. Ryan frowned. Guys, you're overreacting, he said, forcing a laugh. It's just a shadow, probably from the flashlight. But his voice wasn't confident anymore. Daniel stepped closer to him. Just close it, he said seriously. We've seen enough. Ryan rolled his eyes. Fine, he muttered. He slammed the book shut. And instantly, the room went silent. Too silent. Even their breathing felt loud. Emma slowly exhaled. Let's go upstairs, she said. I don't want to stay here anymore. No one argued. They turned and started walking up the stairs, step by step. But something was wrong. The sound, their footsteps, didn't echo anymore. It was like the basement was swallowing the sound. Ryan stopped. "Wait," he said. Daniel turned. "What now?" Ryan frowned. "Do you hear that?" Silence. "I don't hear anything," Daniel replied. Ryan's face slowly changed. "That's the problem," he whispered. They reached the top. Daniel pushed the trapdoor shut quickly. Thud. "Okay," he said, trying to sound calm. "That was weird, but it's over. Let's just relax." Emma shook her head. "No," she whispered. "It's not over." Ryan laughed nervously. "Come on, nothing followed us." And then, knock. Everyone froze. The sound came from below. The basement. Knock, knock. Emma grabbed Daniel's arm tightly. "No," she whispered, terrified. "No, no, no." Daniel swallowed. "Someone's down there," he said, trying to stay logical. Maybe it's just the wood settling." Bang. The trapdoor shook. Ryan stepped back. "Okay, that's not wood," he said. Another hit. Bang. Bang. Something was trying to get out. "Move away," Daniel shouted. They all stepped back. The trapdoor stopped. Silence. Then slowly, the handle moved. On its own. Emma screamed. "It's opening." Daniel grabbed a chair. "Stay behind me," he shouted. The trapdoor creaked open. Slowly. Darkness rising from below. Cold air filling the room. And then, a hand. Pale. Thin. Grabbing the edge. Pulling itself up. Ryan's voice shook. "That's not possible." The figure climbed out. Slowly. Unnaturally. And when it stood up, they saw the face. It was Ryan. Emma screamed. "No. No. He's right there." They turned. The real Ryan was still behind them, breathing fast. Confused. "What the hell is that?" he shouted. The thing smiled. A twisted version of Ryan's smile. "You open the door." Its voice was broken, like multiple voices speaking at once. Ryan stepped back. "No, no, that's not me," he whispered. The thing tilted its head. "It is now." Before anyone could react, it moved. Fast. Too fast. It grabbed Ryan, dragged him forward. "Help me," Ryan screamed. Daniel lunged forward. "Let him go." But the thing turned its head. Its eyes. Completely black. And then, it smiled wider. Too late. A sickening sound filled the room. Crack. Ryan's scream cut off instantly. His body went limp. Emma collapsed to the floor. "No, no, no," she sobbed. Daniel stood frozen, his mind refusing to process what just happened. Sophia whispered, "It's begun." The thing dropped Ryan's body. Then slowly, it stood up again. But now, it didn't look like Ryan anymore. Its body twisted, bones cracking, skin stretching, changing. And then, it became Emma. Perfect. Same face, same voice, except the smile. "Emma," Daniel whispered, shaking. "Stay away from it." But both Emmas stood there, one crying, one smiling, and they spoke together. "Which one is real?" Daniel's heart stopped. Emma screamed, "Daniel, please, it's me, don't listen to it." The other one smiled. "She's lying." Daniel stepped back, his mind breaking. "What do I do?" he whispered. Sophia spoke slowly. "Don't choose." Daniel looked at her. "What?" Sophia's voice trembled. "Because the moment you do..." A pause. "It wins." Silence filled the cabin. The entities smiled wider. And then, the lights went out. Darkness. Complete. And in that darkness, something moved. They don't go back. The cabin was silent. No light. No sound. Only breathing. Heavy. Uneven. Terrified breathing. Daniel stood frozen. He couldn't see anything. "Emma," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Where are you?" No answer. "Ryan," he called again. Nothing. Then, a soft giggle. From somewhere in the dark. Daniel's heart dropped. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice barely holding. Another giggle. Closer this time. Emma's voice suddenly cried out. "Daniel, help me." He turned instantly. Emma, he shouted, moving blindly toward the sound. But before he could reach, something grabbed his arm.
Cold.
Too cold. Daniel screamed. Let go of me. He struggled violently. Daniel, a voice whispered right next to his ear.
Soft. Sweet.
Why are you scared? The grip tightened. Daniel's breathing became frantic. Because you're not human, he shouted. The thing laughed.
Low.
Broken. Neither are you, not anymore. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. Daniel blinked. His vision adjusted, and what he saw made his soul freeze. Emma was on the floor, crawling, her body twisted unnaturally, her back bent in a way no human body could. Emma? Daniel whispered. She slowly lifted her head, her face smiling.
Wide.
Too wide. Daniel, she said sweetly. Come here. Daniel stepped back. No, that's not you. Emma laughed. Then who am I? Her voice changed.
Deeper.
Distorted. Say it. Daniel shook his head violently. No. Suddenly, Sophia screamed from the corner. It's inside her. Daniel turned. Sophia stood near the wall, holding a broken piece of wood like a weapon, her hands shaking. What do we do? Daniel shouted. Sophia's eyes were filled with terror. We don't let it spread. Emma's body jerked violently. Her head snapped sideways, bones cracking. Too late. She lunged forward.
Fast.
Too fast. Daniel barely dodged. Run, Sophia screamed. They ran. Through the cabin, pushing doors open. Heartbeats loud. Breathing broken. Behind them, Emma crawled on the walls, like something not human. Laughing. Screaming. Chasing. They reached the main room. Daniel slammed a chair against the door. She'll break through, he shouted. Sophia shook her head. That's not Emma anymore. A loud crash. The door shook. Emma's voice screamed. Let me in. Daniel grabbed Sophia's shoulders. Tell me what this is, he demanded. You knew something. You recognized that book. Sophia hesitated, her breathing uneven. I've read about it, she said slowly. In old texts, forbidden rituals. Daniel's eyes widened. What rituals? Sophia whispered. Summoning. Silence. Daniel stepped back. No, we didn't summon anything. Sophia shook her head. Ryan did. A loud crack echoed. The door started breaking. He read the words, she continued. He called it, and it answered. Daniel's hands trembled. Then we send it back, he shouted. There has to be a way. Sophia's face went pale. There is. Daniel stepped closer. Then tell me. She looked at him, fear in her eyes. But it needs something. The door burst open. Emma rushed in, her body crawling, upside down, her face twisted. You can't send me back. She laughed. I like it here. Daniel grabbed a knife from the table. Stay back, he shouted. Emma stopped, then slowly stood upright. Her neck cracked back into place. You think that can stop me? She smiled wider. I'm already inside. Suddenly, she looked at Sophia. You know what it needs. Sophia froze. Don't, she whispered. Emma stepped closer. Say it. Sophia's voice broke. A soul. Silence. Daniel's heart dropped. What? Sophia looked at him. To close the door, one of us has to die. Daniel stepped back. No, we'll find another way. Emma laughed. There is no other way. A pause. One of you stays, and the rest can leave. Silence. Heavy.
Deadly.
Daniel looked at Sophia. Sophia looked at him, both realizing the truth. Only one of them would survive. Emma smiled. So, who will it be? The cabin stood silent, but inside, everything was falling apart. Daniel's hands trembled. His eyes moved between Sophia and Emma, or whatever she had become. This is insane, Daniel whispered, shaking his head. We're not killing anyone, we'll find another way. Emma laughed. A broken, echoing sound. There is no other way. She stepped closer. One soul for the door. A pause. Or all of you stay here forever. Sophia's breathing became uneven. Daniel, she said slowly, It's telling the truth. Daniel turned to her. No, he said immediately. No, you don't know that. Sophia shook her head. I do. Silence. Daniel stared at her. What are you saying? He whispered. Sophia looked down, her voice weak. I've seen this before. Daniel's heart dropped. What? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. This place, this cabin? A pause. It's not random. Emma smiled wider. Now she remembers. Daniel stepped closer. Sophia, what are you talking about? Sophia looked at him and finally said, My family died here. Silence. Daniel froze. What? Sophia's voice trembled. Years ago, my parents, my brother, tears rolled down her face. They came here just like us. Emma laughed softly. And they opened the door. Sophia nodded slowly. They found the same book. Daniel's breathing became heavy. And, what happened? Sophia closed her eyes. They didn't leave. Silence. Daniel stepped back. No, he whispered. Sophia continued. One of them tried to sacrifice the other. But they couldn't do it. So it took all of them. The room felt colder.
Heavier.
Daniel looked at Emma. Or the thing wearing her face. You're lying, he said weakly. The thing smiled. Am I? It stepped closer. Or are you just afraid? Daniel clenched his fists. I'm not killing anyone, he said firmly. Emma tilted her head. Then you're all dying. Silence. Sophia stepped forward, her face pale. Daniel. He looked at her. No, he said immediately. Don't even think about it. Sophia's voice broke. If one of us has to die. Daniel shook his head violently. No. Then it should be me. Silence. Daniel felt like the ground disappeared beneath him. No, he whispered. No. We'll find another way. Sophia smiled weakly. You're a good person, Daniel. But this isn't about being good anymore. A pause. It's about ending it. Daniel grabbed her shoulders. I'm not letting you do this, he shouted. Sophia looked at him, her eyes filled with something strange. Not fear. Acceptance. You don't have a choice, she whispered. Before Daniel could react, she pushed him back. Hard. He fell to the ground. Sophia, he shouted. But she turned toward the thing. Slowly. If I do this. Her voice shook. You let him go. Emma smiled. Of course. A pause. I always keep my promises. Daniel tried to stand. No. Don't trust it, he screamed. Sophia looked back at him. One last time. I'm sorry. And then, she grabbed the knife. Daniel's eyes widened. No. But it was too late. Sophia drove the knife into herself. Blood spilled. Her body collapsed. The room went silent. Completely silent. Daniel froze. His mind shattered. No, he whispered, crawling toward her. No, 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 wake up, please. But she didn't move. Didn't breathe. Nothing. Emma stood still, watching, smiling. Then suddenly, the ground shook. The walls cracked. A loud, unnatural sound filled the cabin, like something tearing apart. The basement door burst open. Darkness, rising again. But this time, something was being pulled inside. Emma's body jerked violently. Her smile disappeared. Her face twisted in pain. No, she screamed. You promised. But the darkness didn't stop. It dragged her, pulling her back, into the basement, into the void. Her screams echoed. Then, silence. Everything stopped. The cabin became still, dead quiet. Daniel sat there, holding Sophia's body, tears falling, shaking. It's over, he whispered. But deep inside, something felt wrong, very wrong, because the air still felt heavy. The cabin was silent, too silent. Daniel sat on the floor, holding Sophia's lifeless body, his hands covered in blood, his mind empty. It's over, he whispered again, his voice broken. It's finally over. The air felt still now. No whispers, no movement, just death. Daniel slowly laid Sophia's body down, his hands shaking. I'm sorry, he whispered. I couldn't save you. Tears rolled down his face. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time didn't matter anymore. Daniel stood up slowly.
His legs weak.
I need to leave, he muttered. I need to get out of this place. He walked toward the door. Each step heavy. Painful. He reached the handle.
And paused.
Something
Didn't feel right.
He turned slowly. The cabin looked normal. Broken. Silent. But something was missing. The fear. It was gone. Too suddenly. Daniel frowned. That doesn't make sense, he whispered. His heart started beating faster again. No, he said slowly. No, something's wrong. Because fear doesn't just disappear.
Not like that.
Never like that. He turned back toward the door. And opened it. The forest outside was calm. Wind moving through trees. Normal. Too normal. Daniel stepped outside. Fresh air hit his face. He took a deep breath. I made it, he whispered. I survived. He started walking. Away from the cabin. Step by step. But after a few steps,
He stopped.
slowly, because something caught his attention.
A sound.
Behind him. A whisper. Daniel. His body froze. No, he whispered. Slowly. He turned around. The cabin stood there. Silent. But the door was still open. Darkness inside. Watching. Daniel. The voice came again.
Softer.
Familiar. Don't leave. His breath broke. That voice was Sophia. No, he said, shaking his head. No, you're gone. I saw you. I'm here. The voice whispered gently. I'm still here. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Stop it, he whispered. Stop playing with me. But the voice continued. You left me. Daniel's heart shattered. I didn't leave you, he cried. You sacrificed yourself. You saved me. Silence. Then, did I? The air became colder. Daniel stepped back.
What? The voice changed.
Slightly. Or, did you let me die? Daniel shook his head violently.
No.
That's not true. The voice grew darker. You didn't stop me. A pause. You didn't fight for me. Daniel's breathing became uneven. That's not. You chose to live. Silence. Daniel felt something inside him crack. No, he whispered. No, I didn't choose. Everyone chooses. The voice echoed. Daniel stepped back further. Fear rising again. No, no, no.
Suddenly.
The door of the cabin slammed shut.
Bang.
Daniel flinched. And then, everything went quiet. Completely quiet. Daniel stood there, shaking. What is happening? He whispered. Then, he felt it. Behind him. That same feeling. The one Emma felt. The one all of them felt. Something standing right behind him. Daniel's body went stiff. His breathing stopped. No, he whispered slowly. Don't turn around. His mind screamed. But his body didn't listen. Slowly, very slowly, he turned and saw himself standing there, smiling. Not normal. Too wide. Too empty. Daniel stepped back. No, he whispered. No, this isn't real. The other Daniel tilted its head. You survived. A pause. But I came with you. Daniel's heart stopped. No. You opened the door. Another step closer. And you never closed it. Daniel's legs gave up. He fell to the ground. No, please, he begged. I did everything. I survived. You didn't survive. Silence. The thing smiled wider. You were chosen. Daniel's mind broke. What? The thing leaned closer. The last one, a pause, is always the carrier. Daniel's breath stopped. No, you don't leave the evil behind. The thing whispered. You take it with you. Silence. Daniel's eyes filled with terror. Because now, he understood. Sophia didn't save him. She completed it. Weeks later, people in the city started reporting strange things. Mirrors, reflections, shadows. And a man. Walking alone. Quiet. Normal. But sometimes, when people looked at him closely, they saw something else. Something behind his eyes. Something smiling. And at night, if you stand in front of a mirror and look long enough, you might see him too. standing behind you, watching, waiting, smiling.
There are some memories that never leave you. No matter how much time passes, no matter how far you run, they stay, hidden, waiting. For Lucas Harper, that memory was his mother. Lucas was 9 years old when it happened, too young to understand everything, but old enough to remember every detail. The house they lived in was small, wooden, and always a little too quiet. It stood at the edge of a lonely road, far from neighbors, far from noise, just Lucas and his mother, Emily Harper. She was kind, gentle, soft-spoken, but something about her always felt distant, not in a cold way, but in a way that felt like she was always listening to something else, something Lucas couldn't hear. "Mom?" Lucas would sometimes ask, when he saw her standing still in the hallway, staring into darkness. She would blink, slowly, then smile. "Yes, sweetheart," she would reply. And just like that, everything felt normal again. Or at least, it seemed normal. But nights were different. Lucas hated nights, because every night, at exactly the same time, he would wake up, 2:17 a.m., every single night. He didn't know why. At first, he thought it was just coincidence, a bad dream, a random habit. But then, he started hearing things, soft sounds, not loud, not clear, just enough to wake him up, like footsteps, slow, careful, moving outside his room. The first time it happened, he thought it was his mother. "Mom?" he called softly. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the hallway. Then they continued, walking away. Lucas sat up in bed, his heart beating faster. "Mom?" he called again, louder this time. No response. He got out of bed, slowly, carefully. His small feet touched the cold floor. The door to his room was slightly open. The hallway beyond it was dark, too dark. He stepped closer. "Mom, are you there?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. No answer. But then, he saw something. At the end of the hallway, a figure, standing still, tall, silent. "Mom?" Lucas whispered. The figure didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there, watching. Lucas felt something cold run down his spine. "Mom, please say something," he said, his voice trembling now. "You're scaring me." The figure slowly tilted its head, but still said nothing. Lucas took a step back. Something wasn't right. His mother would never stay silent like that. Never. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him. "Lucas." He froze. That was his mother's voice. Behind him. Slowly, he turned around, and there she was, standing right behind him. "Mom?" he said, confused. "You were there?" He pointed toward the hallway. But when he looked back, the figure was gone. The hallway was empty. His mother frowned. "What are you talking about?" she asked gently. "You were calling me. I came from my room." Lucas stared at her, his breathing uneven. "There was someone there?" he whispered. "I saw them. They were just standing. They didn't say anything." His mother smiled softly. "You probably had a bad dream," she said, placing her hand on his head. "Come on, go back to sleep." Her touch felt warm, comforting. Lucas nodded slowly. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was just a dream. But as he walked back to his room, he couldn't stop thinking. If that was his mother behind him, then who was standing in the hallway? The next night, it happened again. 2:17 a.m. Lucas woke up suddenly. His eyes opened slowly. The room was dark. And then, he heard it. Footsteps. Again. Slow. Careful. Moving outside his door. This time, he didn't call out immediately. He just listened. The footsteps stopped. Right outside his door. Lucas held his breath. Silence. Then, a soft knock. Lucas froze. Lucas, a voice whispered. His heart dropped. That was his mother's voice. Back and index pointing right. Lucas, open the door. His hands started shaking. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Because his mother never knocked. Never. Mom? He whispered slowly. Why are you knocking? Silence. Then the voice came again. Just open the door, sweetheart. The tone had changed slightly. Still soft. Still familiar. But something was missing. Something human. Lucas slowly stepped back. No, he whispered to himself. No, this isn't right. The knocking became slightly louder. Knock, knock. Lucas, open the door. Lucas's breathing became faster. Mom, say something, he said, his voice trembling. Say something only you would say. There was a pause. Then, you like when I read you stories before sleep? You're afraid of the dark, but you don't tell anyone. And you always hide your toy under the pillow. Lucas's eyes widened. That was true. All of it. But still, something felt wrong. Very wrong. He shook his head. No, he whispered. You're not my mom. Silence. Complete silence. Then, the voice changed. Deeper. Colder. Open. The door. Lucas screamed. No. And ran to his bed, pulling the blanket over himself, covering his ears. But even then, he could still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. Louder. More aggressive. Open the door. Lucas started crying. Please go away, he sobbed. Please, leave me alone. And then suddenly, silence. Everything stopped. The knocking, the voice, everything. Lucas slowly lowered the blanket. The room was quiet again. Too quiet. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Lucas ran to his mother. Mom, he said quickly, someone came to my door last night. They sounded like you, but it wasn't you. His mother looked at him. Her expression changed. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she smiled. You're just having nightmares, she said softly. There's no one else in this house, just you and me. Lucas stared at her. Something in her eyes felt different. For a second, they looked empty. But then it was gone. Come on, she said. You'll be late for school. Lucas nodded slowly, but deep inside, he knew something was wrong. And that night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., it would come again. That night, Lucas didn't want to sleep. He tried. He really tried. But every time he closed his eyes, he heard it again. That voice. Open the door. The memory of it made his chest tighten. So he stayed awake, sitting on his bed, hugging his pillow tightly. The room felt colder than usual. The silence was louder than any sound. Lucas kept looking at the clock. 1:52 a.m. 2:03 a.m. 2:11 a.m. His breathing became faster. It's going to happen again. He knew it. And then, the clock changed. 2:17 a.m. Lucas stopped breathing. For a moment, nothing happened. Silence. Complete silence. Lucas blinked slowly. Maybe it's over. But then, step. His body froze. Step, step. Footsteps. Outside his door. Same as before. Slow. Careful. Lucas's hands started shaking. No, he whispered to himself. Not again. Please not again. The footsteps stopped. Right outside his door. Lucas held his breath. And then, knock. A single knock. Soft. Lucas closed his eyes tightly. Go away, he whispered, his voice trembling. Please, just go away. Another knock. Knock, knock. The voice. Lucas. His entire body went cold. It was her. Or at least, it sounded exactly like her. Lucas, open the door, it's me. Lucas slowly shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. No, he whispered. You're not my mom. Silence. Then the voice came again, this time softer, almost hurt. Why would you say that, sweetheart? Lucas's heart ached, because that tone, that gentle, loving tone, it was his real mother. Because, Lucas said, his voice breaking, my mom doesn't knock, she never knocks, she just comes in. There was a pause, a long pause, the faint laugh, not loud, not clear, but wrong, very wrong. You're learning, the voice whispered slowly. Lucas's eyes widened. That wasn't his mother anymore. That wasn't even pretending to be her. Who are you? Lucas asked, his voice shaking violently. What do you want from me? The voice didn't answer immediately. Instead, something else happened. The handle of his door slowly moved. Lucas gasped. No, 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 he whispered, backing away from the door. You can't come in. I didn't open it. The handle stopped. Silence. Then the voice came again. You don't have to open the door. Pause. I can come in other ways. Lucas's heart stopped. What? He whispered. And then, from behind him, Lucas? He froze. That voice, it came from inside his room. Slowly, very slowly, he turned around, and there she was, his mother, standing inside his room. Mom? Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. How did you get in here? She smiled gently. You forgot to close the window, she said softly. Lucas's eyes moved toward the window. It was slightly open, but he didn't remember opening it. Not tonight. Not ever. His mother stepped closer. Her footsteps were soft, almost silent. Why are you awake? She asked, her voice calm. You should be sleeping. Lucas stared at her. Something felt off. Her face looked the same. Her voice sounded the same. But her eyes, they looked empty, like something inside them was missing. Mom, Lucas said slowly, were you just outside my door? She stopped. For a moment, her expression didn't change. Then she smiled again. No, sweetheart. I was in my room. Lucas's throat went dry. But, I heard you, he said, his voice trembling. You were knocking, you were asking me to open the door. She tilted her head slightly. You must be dreaming again, she said softly. You've been having a lot of nightmares lately. Lucas shook his head. No, he said firmly. That wasn't a dream. His mother walked closer. Too close. She placed her hand on his head. You're scared? She whispered. But I'm here now, there's nothing to be afraid of. Lucas flinched slightly. Her touch was cold. Too cold. Mom, he whispered slowly. Why are your hands so cold? She didn't answer. Instead, her smile widened slightly. Maybe you're just imagining things, she said softly. Lucas stepped back. No, he whispered. You're not my mom. Silence. The room felt heavier, darker. Then suddenly, her smile disappeared. Her face went still, completely still. If I'm not your mother, she said slowly, her voice deeper now, unnatural. Then where is she? Lucas's heart stopped. What? He whispered. She leaned closer. Where do you think she went? Lucas started shaking. I don't know, he said, tears forming again. You're my mom, you're right here. She laughed. Low, broken, distorted laugh. No, she whispered. I'm not. The lights flickered. The room grew colder. Lucas screamed. Stop it. Stop it. But she didn't stop. Her face started changing. Not completely. Just slightly. Enough to look wrong. Enough to look not human. You let me in, Lucas, she whispered. Lucas shook his head violently. No, I didn't. I didn't open the door. She smiled again. Not tonight. Pause. But before. Lucas froze. Memories flashed in his mind. A night. Rain. Thunder. He was scared. Crying. Someone was knocking at the door. He had opened it. Mom, he whispered. You called for her, the thing said softly. You were alone, scared, crying. Lucas's body went numb. And I answered. Silence. Complete silence. Tears rolled down Lucas's face. Where is my real mom? He asked slowly, his voice breaking completely. The thing smiled. Do you really want to know? Lucas nodded weakly. The thing leaned closer. She's still outside. Lucas's heart stopped. What? He whispered. She's been knocking every night, trying to come in. Lucas turned slowly toward the door, his breathing heavy, his hands shaking. And then, knock, knock, Lucas screamed. Lucas, a voice cried from outside. It's me. Open the door. That voice, it was his real mother. Lucas looked back at the thing inside his room. It smiled. Go ahead, it whispered. Open the door. Lucas stood frozen, between two voices, two mothers, one inside, one outside, and he realized something terrifying. One of them was waiting to replace the other, frozen, between two voices, one inside the room, and one outside the door, both calling him, both claiming to be his mother. His breathing became uneven. His chest felt tight. Lucas, please, the voice outside cried. Open the door, it's me, don't listen to it. Lucas's eyes filled with tears. That voice, it sounded real, desperate, scared. Lucas, the thing behind him whispered softly. You already know. I'm the one who stayed with you. I'm the one who never left you alone. Lucas slowly turned his head. The thing stood there, smiling, watching him. Its face still looked like his mother. But now, the illusion was breaking. The eyes were darker, deeper, and the smile was no longer human. You're not my mom, Lucas whispered again, his voice shaking. The thing tilted its head. Then why did you hug me? It asked softly. Why did you trust me, every night, every time you were scared? Lucas couldn't answer, because it was true. Every time he woke up scared, every time he cried, she was there. Or at least, something was there. The knocking on the door became louder. Bang, bang, bang. Lucas, the voice outside screamed. Open the door right now. Lucas covered his ears. Stop it. Please stop, he cried. The thing stepped closer. You don't need her, it whispered. She left you, remember? Lucas froze. What? He whispered. The thing smiled. That night. Lucas's mind flashed again. Rain, thunder, darkness. He was alone, crying. His mother wasn't home. He kept calling her, again and again, but she didn't come. She left you alone, the thing whispered slowly, and you were scared, so scared. Lucas's breathing became heavier. I was waiting, he said weakly. She said she would come back. The thing leaned closer, but she didn't. Silence. Lucas felt something break inside him. Tears streamed down his face. Why didn't she come? He whispered. The thing didn't answer immediately. Instead, it smiled. Because she couldn't. Lucas's heart stopped. What do you mean? He asked slowly. The thing pointed toward the door. Why don't you ask her? The knocking outside became desperate. Lucas, please. It's me, the voice cried. I'm begging you, open the door, don't stay with that thing. Lucas's legs moved, slowly, step by step, toward the door. The thing behind him didn't stop him, just watched, smiling. Go on, it whispered softly. Find out the truth. Lucas reached the door. His hand touched the handle. It was cold, very cold. Lucas, the voice outside said softly now. Please, trust me. I'm your mother. Lucas closed his eyes. Mom, he whispered. Where were you that night? Silence. Then the voice replied. I was coming back. I was driving, there was an accident. I couldn't reach you. Lucas's body went still. Accident. That word again. Lucas, the voice continued breaking. I've been trying to come back, every night, but something is stopping me. Lucas slowly turned his head. The thing behind him smiled wider. She's lying, it whispered. Lucas looked back at the door. Mom, he said softly. If you're really my mom. His voice trembled. Then why didn't you answer me that night, when I was calling you? There was a long silence. Then, a whisper. Because I was already gone. Lucas's heart stopped. No, he whispered. I died that night, Lucas, the voice said, filled with pain. I never made it back. Lucas's world shattered. No, 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 he said, shaking his head violently. That's not true. You're here, you're talking to me. The voice broke into tears. No, I'm not inside. I'm outside, trying to come back to you. Lucas slowly looked behind him. The thing stood there, smiling, waiting. Now you understand, it said softly. Lucas's body went numb. You, he whispered. The thing nodded slowly. You called for your mother? Pause. And I answered first. Tears rolled down Lucas's face. You took her place, he whispered. The thing stepped closer. No. It smiled. I became what you needed. The knocking outside grew weaker. Lucas, the voice cried softly. Please, let me in. Lucas's hand tightened on the door handle. His mind was breaking. Two choices. Open the door, or stay with the thing. His breathing became slower. His tears stopped. And then, he slowly removed his hand from the door. No, he whispered. The voice outside stopped. Lucas, it said weakly. Lucas turned around, facing the thing. You stayed with me, he said softly. You never left me alone. The thing smiled. I told you. Lucas wiped his tears. I don't want to be alone again. Silence. Then, the knocking outside stopped. Completely. The voice, gone. Forever. The room became still. Quiet. The thing stepped closer. And for the first time, it hugged him. Cold, but comforting. Studio microphone narration slows, darker tone. Years later, neighbors often talked about that house. They said a boy lived there, with his mother. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Because sometimes, at night, people passing by could hear a voice outside the door, begging, crying. Lucas, please, let me in. But the door never opened. And inside, a boy sat quietly, smiling, not scared anymore, never alone again. I hope you enjoyed the story of Lucas and the two mothers. If you did, please subscribe to join our community and give this video a like. Let me know in the comments what kind of horror or moral stories you want to see next. Your suggestion might be my next script.
Some things don't want to be seen. Some things don't want to be heard. But once you start recording, it started with a small problem. A simple disturbance. Something that didn't make sense. Daniel, Emily said one night, her voice low. Did you hear that? Daniel looked up from his laptop. Hear what? She hesitated. Footsteps, she whispered. Like someone walking in the hallway. Daniel sighed. Probably the neighbors, he said casually. These apartments have thin walls. Emily shook her head slowly. No, it was inside. Silence. Daniel looked at her. Her face was pale. Eyes slightly wide. You're just tired, he said gently. You've been stressed lately? But Emily didn't respond, because deep inside, she knew what she heard. The next night, it happened again. This time louder. Step, step, step. Emily sat up in bed, her breathing fast. Daniel, she whispered, shaking him. Wake up, it's happening again. Daniel groaned. What? Listen, she said. They both stayed still, silent, waiting, and then, step, right outside the bedroom door. Daniel sat up instantly. His expression changed. You heard that? Emily whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He got out of bed slowly, walked toward the door. His hand reached the handle. Stay here, he said quietly. Emily grabbed his arm. No, don't go alone. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Okay, together. He opened the door, slowly. Creak. The hallway was empty, dark, silent, nothing. Daniel stepped out, checked the living room, kitchen, bathroom, everything, nothing. No one's here, he said. Emily stood behind him, her voice trembling. Then who was walking? That was the moment Daniel changed. Not completely, but enough, because logic didn't have an answer. The next day, Daniel came home with a camera, a professional one. Emily frowned. What's that for? Daniel placed it on the table. We're recording tonight. Emily looked confused. Recording what? Daniel replied calmly. Whatever is in this house. Silence. Emily swallowed. You think something is actually here? Daniel hesitated, then said, I think something is happening. That night, they set up the camera, facing the bedroom. Wide angle. Everything visible. Bed, door, hallway. Daniel adjusted the angle. This will capture everything, he said. Emily sat on the bed, nervous. What if we see something? She asked. Daniel gave a small smile. Then we'll finally know the truth. They turned off the lights. The room went dark.
Only faint light from the camera. Recording. Watching. Waiting. Time passes, slow, heavy. 2:03 a.m. Nothing. 2:17 a.m. Still nothing. Emily was almost asleep. Daniel too. Then, click. Both of their eyes opened. The sound came from the hallway. Like a door unlocking. Did you hear that? Emily whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah. They stayed still. Listening. And then, step, step, step. The same footsteps. Coming closer. Closer. Toward the bedroom. Emily grabbed Daniel's arm tightly. Don't move, she whispered. The footsteps stopped. Right outside the door. Silence. Then, the door moved. Slowly. Opening on its own. Creak. Daniel's heart started racing. Emily's breathing became fast. No, she whispered. The door opened completely. Dark hallway. Nothing visible. But the feeling, something was there. Watching them. Daniel whispered. Who's there? No answer. Just silence. Heavy. Unnatural. Then suddenly, bang. The door slammed shut. Emily screamed. Daniel jumped out of bed. What the hell? He rushed to the door. Opened it. Nothing. Again. Nothing. They didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. The next morning, Daniel checked the footage. Fast. Focused. Skipping through hours. Nothing. 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 Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the footage changed. Daniel leaned closer. What? The bedroom door. Opened slowly. On its own. Just like they saw. But something else. Something they didn't notice that night. A shadow. Standing in the hallway. Tall. Watching them sleep. Daniel's hands started shaking. No, he whispered. Emily looked at the screen. And froze. Daniel, she whispered. Zoom it. He zoomed in. The image became clearer. And what they saw made their blood run cold. It had a face. But not a normal one. Distorted. Like something trying to be human. But failing. And then, moved. On the footage, the shadow slowly turned. Toward the camera. Directly at them. And smiled. Long. Impossible. Smile. The screen suddenly glitched. Static. Then, the video stopped. Daniel sat back. Speechless. Emily started crying. What is that? She whispered. Daniel didn't answer. Because deep inside, he already knew. This wasn't just a sound. This wasn't just imagination. Something was inside the house. And now, it knew they were watching. Narration, final whisper. That night, they thought they were recording it. But they didn't realize it was recording them too. The room was silent. But not peaceful. There's a difference. Daniel sat in front of his laptop. The footage still paused on the screen. That face. That impossible, distorted face. He couldn't look away. This is not fake, he whispered to himself. This can't be edited. I didn't touch this. Emily stood behind him. Her hands shaking. Turn it off, she said quietly. Please, just turn it off. Daniel didn't move. We need to understand what this is, he said. If it's real, we can't just ignore it. Emily's voice cracked. It saw us, Daniel. Silence. Daniel swallowed. Because she was right. The way it looked at the camera. It wasn't random. It was aware. That night, they didn't argue. They didn't question. They just set up more cameras. Living room. Kitchen. Hallway. Bedroom. Every corner covered. If it's in this house, Daniel said, adjusting the last camera, we're going to see everything it does. Emily hugged herself. What if it doesn't want to be seen? She whispered. Daniel paused. Then replied. Then it shouldn't have shown itself. They went to bed. Lights off. Cameras recording. Watching. Waiting. Time passes, slow, heavy. 1:42 a.m. Nothing. 2:05 a.m. Still nothing. 2:16 a.m. Emily's eyes opened. Suddenly. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Just listened. Then, a small sound. From the kitchen. Her heart started racing. Daniel, she whispered. Wake up. He opened his eyes slowly. What? Listen, she said. They both stayed still. And then, clink, like metal hitting the floor. From the kitchen. Daniel sat up instantly. That's not normal, he said quietly. Emily grabbed his arm. Don't go, she whispered. Please don't go. Daniel hesitated. Then slowly said, we need to see this. He got out of bed. Walked toward the door. His step heavy. Careful. The hallway was dark. silent. But something felt wrong. Too quiet. Like the house was holding its breath. Daniel reached the kitchen and froze. A spoon, lying on the floor, in the center of the room. That wasn't there before, he whispered. Emily stood behind him, shaking. Let's go back, she said quickly. I don't like this, something's wrong. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, let's just. Thud. Both jumped. The cabinet door slammed shut on its own. Emily screamed. Daniel? Daniel stepped back quickly. What the hell? Another sound. Clack, clack. The cabinets, opening, one by one, slowly, then slamming shut. Hard. Aggressive. Emily started crying. Stop it, she screamed. Please stop. The movement stopped instantly. Silence. Dead silence. Daniel's breathing was heavy. What is this? He whispered. Then, drag. A slow dragging sound. From the living room. Like something being pulled. Across the floor. Daniel turned. Slowly. Stay behind me, he whispered. They walked toward the living room. Step by step. And when they reached, they froze. The chair. A heavy wooden chair. Was moving. On its own. Dragging slowly across the floor. No one touching it. No wind. No explanation. Just moving. Emily collapsed to her knees. No, no, this is not real. Daniel stood still. Completely frozen. His logic. Gone. The chair stopped. Suddenly. And turned. Facing them. Like something sitting in it. Watching them. Waiting. Daniel whispered. Who are you? Silence. Then. Whisper. Soft. Barely audible. But clear. Leave. Emily looked at him in terror. Did you hear that? She whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. The whisper came again. Louder this time. Leave now. Emily stood up instantly. We're leaving, she said, panic rising. We're leaving right now. Daniel didn't argue. For the first time. He was scared too. They packed quickly. Hands shaking. Throwing clothes into bags. Just go, Emily kept repeating. Daniel grabbed the car keys. Let's get out of here. They rushed to the door. Daniel reached for the handle. And then, it locked. On its own. And oh, Emily screamed. Daniel pulled harder. It's not opening. The lights flickered. Violently. The air turned cold. Too cold. And then, something laughed. Oh, it. Not human. Right behind them. They turned slowly. And saw. The hallway. Dark. But not empty. A shadow. Standing there. Taller now. Clear. Closer. And this time. It wasn't hiding. It took a step forward. And the floor creaked. Real. Physical. Daniel stepped back. What do you want? He whispered. The shadow stopped. Then slowly. It pointed. Toward Emily. Silence. Emily's body went cold. Daniel, she whispered. Why is it pointing at me? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. The shadow tilted its head. Then spoke. You called me? Emily froze. What? The voice echoed again. You called me? The lights went out. Complete darkness. Emily screamed. Daniel grabbed her hand tightly. I'm here. I'm here. But then, her hand slipped away. Emily, he shouted. No answer. Just silence. And something breathing. Close. Very close. Darkness filled the house. Complete. Silent. Except. Breathing. Not Daniel's. Something else. Close. Too close. Emily? Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. Where are you? No answer. He reached forward blindly. His hands trembling. Emily, he called again. Then, Daniel? Her voice, soft, from the hallway. Relief flooded his chest. Emily, he said quickly. Stay there. I'm coming. He stepped forward. Slowly. Carefully. The darkness felt thick. Heavy. Like something watching him from every direction. Emily, talk to me, he said. Are you okay? Silence. Then, I'm here. Closer now. But something was wrong. Her voice felt empty. Daniel stopped. Emily, he whispered. A faint light flickered. The hallway dimly visible now. And at the end, someone was standing. Still. Motionless. Emily, Daniel said softly. No response. He stepped closer. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. The lights flickered again. For a second, everything went dark. And when the light came back, She was closer. Too close. Daniel froze. Emily, how did you? She lifted her head slowly, and Daniel felt his heart stop, because her eyes were completely black. No emotion. No life. Just darkness. Emily? He whispered, backing away. What's wrong with you? She smiled. Slowly. Too wide. Too unnatural. You should have left. Daniel's breath broke. That's not you, he said. That's not you, Emily. She tilted her head. You didn't listen? A step forward. Now it stays. Daniel turned and ran. His heart pounding. His mind breaking. This is not real. This is not real, he kept repeating. Behind him. Footsteps. Fast. Chasing. Not normal footsteps. Something crawling. Something dragging. Something wrong. Daniel reached the bedroom. Locked the door. Pushed a chair against it. Breathing heavily. No, he whispered. No, this can't be happening. Then, thud. The door shook. Daniel jumped back. Go away, he shouted. Leave us alone. Silence. Then, scratch, scratch. From the other side of the door. Like nails dragging across wood. Slow. Intentional. Emily's voice whispered. Let me in. Daniel shook his head violently. No, you're not Emily. Silence. Then, Daniel? Her voice. Soft again. Normal. I'm scared. Tears filled Daniel's eyes. Emily, he whispered. Please, open the door. His hand slowly moved toward the handle. His mind fighting. It's her. No, it's not. Daniel, she cried softly. Please, it hurts. His fingers touched the lock. He closed his eyes. Then suddenly, don't. A voice behind him. Daniel froze. He turned slowly and saw the camera on the table, the screen flickering, showing the hallway. And on the screen, Emily was still standing there, scratching the door. But behind her, something else stood, taller, darker, holding her, like a puppet. Daniel's blood ran cold. No, he whispered. The thing behind her slowly leaned forward, into the camera, and smiled. That same, impossible smile. Daniel stepped back, horror flooding his body. That's not Emily, he whispered. The voice outside changed instantly. You're smart. Inhuman. Angry. But not enough. Suddenly, crack. The door split. Wood breaking. Emily's hand pushed through. Twisted. Wrong. Daniel grabbed something. A lamp. Stay back, he shouted. The door burst open. Emily stepped inside. Slowly. Her body moving unnaturally. Like something wearing her skin. You called me? She said again. Daniel shook his head. No, I didn't. She smiled. Not you. Pause. Her. Silence. Daniel's heart stopped. What? She stepped closer. She called me? She asked for help. She wanted someone to listen. Daniel's mind raced. Emily? He whispered. The thing nodded. Lonely. Afraid. Broken. A smile. Perfect. Daniel felt something inside him collapse. No, he whispered. The thing leaned closer. I came for her. Pause. But I stayed for you. Daniel screamed. Get away from me. He threw the lamp. It hit her. But she didn't react. Didn't feel it. Didn't care. She moved forward. Slowly. Relentlessly. And then, she grabbed him. Art. Too strong. Daniel struggled. Let me go. She leaned close to his face. Her black eyes staring into his soul. You're part of this now. That night, something changed. Not just in the house, but inside them. Because once something enters, Daniel turned. Slowly. Even though every part of him screamed, don't do it. But it was too late. He looked behind him. And saw. Nothing. Just darkness. Empty hallway. Silent. Daniel blinked. Confused. What? He whispered. Then suddenly, a hand touched his shoulder. Cold. Too cold. Daniel froze. Because he knew. There was no one there. Slowly. He looked down. At the hand. And his blood ran cold. It was not human. Long fingers. Too thin. Skin stretched tight. Almost black. Daniel tried to move. But his body didn't respond. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. Couldn't even blink. Then, the voice came again. Right inside his ear. Now you feel it. Daniel's heart pounded violently. What do you want? He whispered, barely able to speak. Pause. Then, everything. Suddenly, His body moved. On its own. A step forward. Then another. Daniel's eyes widened. No, no. Stop. But his body didn't listen. It kept walking. Slowly. Toward Emily. Or what was left of her. She stood there. Smiling. Watching him. You see, she whispered softly. It doesn't ask any more. It takes. Daniel struggled. His muscles shaking. I'm not letting you control me, he shouted. But the force inside him tightened. Stronger. More violent. You don't belong to yourself anymore. Daniel's body jerked. Then suddenly, he was lifted. Thrown back. Slamming into the wall. Etched, he screamed. The air left his lungs. Pain exploded through his body. He fell to the floor. Coughing. Struggling to breathe. Emily slowly walked toward him. Her steps unnatural. Like something dragging her forward. It's easier if you stop fighting. Daniel looked up at her. Tears in his eyes. Emily, please, he whispered. I know you're still in there. I know you can hear me. For a moment, her expression changed. A flicker. Weak. Broken. Daniel? Oh, just for a second. Daniel crawled toward her. I'm here, he said softly. I'm not leaving you, we'll get through this. But then, her body snapped. Violently. Her head twisted. Her smile returned. Bigger. More disturbing. Hope is the easiest thing to break. Daniel stopped. His heart shattered again. No. Suddenly, the room shook. Objects began to move. Fast. Violently. Chairs flipping. Tables sliding. Glass shattering. Emily didn't move. She just stood there. Watching. Enjoying it. It's angry now. Daniel tried to stand. But something held him down. Invisible. Heavy. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe properly. What does it want from me? He shouted. Emily stepped closer. Knelt beside him. Her face inches from his. It doesn't want something. Pause. It wants someone. Daniel's eyes widened. No. She smiled. A body. Silence. Daniel felt cold terror spread through him. No. No. She leaned closer. And you're perfect. Daniel struggled harder. I won't let you, he screamed. Suddenly, the pressure released. He gasped. Air rushing back into his lungs. He rolled away quickly, trying to escape. But the moment he stood, he saw it. Clearly. For the first time. Standing in the hallway. Not a shadow anymore. Not hidden. Fully visible. Tall. Twisted. His body unnatural. Limbs too long. Face barely human. Eyes empty. And that smile. Endless. Daniel froze. Completely. Because now, there was no doubt. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't fear. This was real. The entity slowly stepped forward. The floor creaking under its weight. Each step echoing. Heavy. Final. Daniel whispered. What are you? It stopped. And then, it spoke. Not with a voice, but inside his head. I am what listens. Daniel's body shook. I didn't call you, he whispered. Pause. She did. The entity turned its head slightly. Toward Emily. And now, it looked back at Daniel. You answer. Daniel backed away. No. But there was nowhere to go. Nowhere to run. The entity raised its hand. Slowly. Reaching toward him. And Daniel felt it again. That pull. That force. Trying to take control. Trying to enter him. No. Get away, he screamed. But his body betrayed him. He couldn't move. Couldn't fight. The entity came closer. 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 Until it was right in front of him. Face to face. And then, it smiled wider. And whispered, let me in. That night, Daniel realized something. Something terrifying. Because this wasn't just haunting. This wasn't just fear. This was a transfer. And the moment he understood, it was already too late. Daniel couldn't move. He stood there, frozen, face to face with it. The thing that wasn't human. The thing that had been watching, waiting, growing, inside his home, inside his life. Stay away, Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. Stay away from me. But the entity didn't stop. It moved closer. Slow. Come. Like it had all the time in the world. Because it did. You don't understand, Daniel said, shaking his head. This is my body, my life. You can't just take it. Silence. Then. It was never yours. The voice echoed inside his head. Cold. Empty. Daniel felt something snap inside him. No, he whispered. The entity raised its hand. Slowly. and placed it on Daniel's chest. The moment it touched him, everything changed. Daniel screamed. Pain exploded through his body. Not physical, deeper, like something digging inside him. Tearing, breaking, entering. Stop. Please stop, he cried. But it didn't stop. It never stopped. The world around him began to fade. The room, the walls, the house, everything disappeared. And suddenly, he wasn't there anymore. Daniel stood in darkness. Endless darkness. No walls. No floor. No escape. What is this? He whispered. Then, he heard voices. Whispers. Many voices. All around him. Help me. Don't leave me. It's still here. Daniel's heart dropped. Who's there? He shouted. Then, faces appeared. In the darkness. Faint. Broken. Distorted. People. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Their eyes empty. Their expressions frozen in fear. What happened to you? Daniel whispered. One of them stepped forward. A man. His voice weak. We saw it. Another voice. We heard it. Another. We answered. Daniel shook his head. No. The voices echoed together. Now we're here. Silence. Daniel stepped back. Realization hitting him slowly. No, this can't be. Then, he saw her. Emily. Standing among them. Still. Silent. Her eyes empty. Emily, he shouted, running toward her. Emily, I'm here. Talk to me. She didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't even blink. Emily, please, he whispered. Say something. Then slowly, she turned her head and looked at him. But it wasn't her. Not anymore. You're here now. Daniel froze. No. Her voice echoed, just like the rest. The darkness began to close in. The voices grew louder. Whispers turning into screams. Daniel covered his ears. Make it stop, he shouted. But it didn't stop. It never stopped. Studio microphone narration shifts back. Reality. Morning came. Sunlight entered the house. Soft. Calm. Peaceful. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Daniel stood in the living room. Still. Silent. Emily stood beside him. Also still. Also silent. They looked fine. No injuries. No struggle. No sign of what happened. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Because they didn't move. Not for a long time. Hours passed. Then slowly, Daniel smiled. Slow. A natural smile. Emily smiled too. At the same time. Perfectly synchronized. Too perfect. Days later, neighbors started noticing strange things. The house. Always quiet. Too quiet. But sometimes at night, lights turned on by themselves. Doors opened. Footsteps echoed. And sometimes, people heard voices. From inside. Calling them. Soft. Familiar. Safe. Can you help me? I think something's wrong. Please, come inside. And if someone is foolish enough to listen, to answer, to step inside that house, they won't find Daniel. They won't find Emily. Not really, because what lives there now.
Arthur Vance was a man of absolute precision. In the small town of Oakhaven, people didn't set their watches by the radio. They set them by Arthur. Every morning at 7:30 a.m., he stepped off his porch in a pressed charcoal suit. At 5:15 p.m., he boarded the express train from the city. At 5:45 p.m., his silhouette would appear at the end of his driveway. He was a man of few words and zero surprises. He worked as a senior auditor for a firm that dealt with historical discrepancies, old bank ledgers, and forgotten accounts. His wife, Sarah, used to joke that Arthur was so predictable. Even the stray cats knew when to move off his sidewalk. But on November 12, 1998, the precision broke. It was a Tuesday. A cold, relentless rain was washing the color out of the suburbs. Sarah had prepared a pot roast, Arthur's favorite Tuesday meal. 5:45 p.m. came and went. The driveway remained empty. At 6 p.m., she stepped onto the porch, squinting into the gray sheets of rain. No Arthur. She called his office. He left at 5 p.m. sharp as always, his secretary said. Sarah called the station. The 5:15 p.m. express had arrived on time. There had been no accidents, no delays. By 9 p.m., the police were involved. Detective Elias Thorne, a man with a tired face and a sharp mind, took the lead. He went straight to the train station. Thorne reviewed the security tapes. The footage was grainy, but Arthur was unmistakable. He was seen walking onto the platform, holding a brown leather briefcase and a folded newspaper. He boarded carriage 4. Thorne then interviewed 3 regular commuters who sat in that same carriage. They all said the same thing. Arthur was there. He sat in his usual window seat. He opened his newspaper. But then a strange detail emerged. The lights flickered, one witness said. We were passing through the old tunnel under Blackwood Hill. It only lasted 3 seconds. When the lights came back on, the seat next to me was empty. I thought he'd just gone to the restroom. But Arthur hadn't gone to the restroom. When the train reached Oakhaven, the conductor checked carriage 4. Arthur's seat was indeed empty. On the seat sat his folded newspaper. On the floor sat his brown leather briefcase. But Arthur Vance had vanished from a moving, locked express train. Detective Thorne opened the briefcase. He expected to find tax audits or bank statements. Instead, he found something that made his skin crawl. The briefcase was filled with hundreds of Polaroids. They weren't photos of people. They were photos of Arthur's own house, taken from the woods behind his backyard. There were photos of Sarah sleeping. There were photos of Arthur himself, taken through the frosted glass of his office window. But the most disturbing part? The dates on the back of the photos. Some were dated 1978. Some were dated 1985. But Arthur and Sarah had only moved to Oakhaven in 1992. Thorne realized he wasn't looking for a missing person. He was looking for a man who had been living a lie for decades. Thorne went back to Sarah. He showed her the photos. She went pale, but she didn't look surprised. She led Thorne to the basement, to a small crawl space behind the water heater. Inside was a metal box. Arthur told me never to open this, she whispered. He said it was his insurance policy. Inside the box was a birth certificate and a passport for a man named David Miller. The photo on the passport was Arthur, but it was dated 20 years ago. Beneath the passport was a newspaper clipping from a different city, dated 1978. The headline read, Accountant David Miller vanishes from commuter train. Wife suspected. Thorne called the precinct from that city. The detective who handled the 1978 case was still alive. When Thorne explained the situation, the old detective gasped. That's impossible, the old man said. We found David Miller's body in the woods 2 weeks after he vanished in 78. I saw him with my own eyes. He was buried in St. Jude Cemetery. Thorne went back to the only place that made sense, the Blackwood Tunnel. He took a team of officers and searched every inch of the tracks inside that dark, dripping stone archway. Halfway through the tunnel, they found a maintenance door. It was rusted shut, but the scratches on the handle were fresh. They kicked the door open. Inside was a small room meant for track workers. It was filled with monitors. These monitors weren't hooked up to cameras. They were playing loops of Arthur's life. Arthur eating breakfast. Arthur walking to the train. Arthur sleeping. In the corner of the room, sitting in a wooden chair, was a man. He was wearing a charcoal suit. He was holding a brown leather briefcase. He looked exactly like Arthur, but he was older, much older. His hair was snow white, and his skin was like parchment. You're late, the man said. His voice sounded like grinding stones. The man explained that he was the real Arthur Vance. In 1978, he had discovered a glitch in the Blackwood Tunnel, a moment where time didn't move forward, but folded over itself. He had tried to escape his life, his debts, and his failures by stepping through that fold. But the fold required a balance. If one Arthur left, another had to take his place. The man Sarah had been living with for the last 6 years wasn't an imposter. He was a replacement, a version of Arthur from a different point in the loop. The Arthur who vanished from the train that night hadn't been kidnapped. His time was simply up. He had been pulled back into the fold to make room for the next one. "Where is he now?" Thorne asked, his hand on his service pistol. The old man pointed to the monitor. On the screen, the 5:15 p.m. express was pulling into the station. A man in a charcoal suit stepped off the train. He adjusted his tie. He began walking toward the driveway. "He's going home to Sarah," the old man whispered. "He always goes home to Sarah." Thorne rushed back to the Vance house. He pulled into the driveway just as the figure in the charcoal suit reached the front door. "Arthur!" Thorne yelled. The man turned. It was Arthur. He looked young, refreshed, and completely confused. "Can I help you, detective?" Thorne looked past him into the house. Sarah was standing in the hallway, her face filled with a mixture of terror and relief. She looked at the man at the door, then at Thorne. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out and closed the door, locking it from the inside. Detective Thorne went back to the tunnel the next day, but the maintenance door was gone. Not just locked, the stone wall was solid, as if the door had never existed. He went to St. Jude's Cemetery and exhumed the body of David Miller from 1978. When they opened the casket, it was empty, except for a folded newspaper and a brown leather briefcase. Arthur Vance continued to live in Oakhaven for another 6 years. He was perfectly predictable. He was never late. He never missed a Tuesday pot roast. And then, on November 12, 2004, the lights flickered in the Blackwood Tunnel once again. Arthur Vance never came home that night. And at the end of the driveway, a new silhouette was already waiting to take his place. Thorne went back to Sarah. The sun over Varna Airport was relentless. It was July 8, 2014, a Tuesday morning in Bulgaria, and the tarmac shimmered with a dry, suffocating heat. Inside the terminal, the atmosphere was sterile, the usual hum of rolling suitcases and muffled gate announcements. Nothing about the scene suggested that, in mere moments, a 28-year-old German man would become a ghost. Lars Mittank was not a man prone to shadows. Tall, athletic, and well-liked, he had come to the Golden Sands Resort with friends for a week of sun and football. But the vacation had taken a jagged turn. A physical altercation with some rival fans over a football disagreement had left Lars with a ruptured eardrum. His friends had flown home days earlier, but the doctor's orders were clear. The pressure of a flight could shatter his inner ear. Lars had to stay behind. For the last 24 hours, the man his family knew had begun to dissolve. Before arriving at the airport, Lars had spent a terrifying night at the Hotel Color, a budget lodging in a gritty part of Varna. He had called his mother, Sandra, in the middle of the night, his voice a frantic whisper that didn't sound like his own. "They won't let me leave," he hissed into the receiver. "4 men are following me. What is cefuroxime 500? He was referring to the antibiotic prescribed for his ear, but in his mind, the pills had become a catalyst for a conspiracy. He spent the night pacing the hallways, hiding in the elevator, and peering through the curtains at a world he was convinced was closing in on him. By the time the sun rose, Lars seemed to have regained a fragile grip on reality. He took a taxi to the airport, hoping to finally fly home to Germany. At 9 a.m., Lars entered the office of Dr. Kostakostov, the airport physician. He needed a final signature to be cleared for flight. To the casual observer, Lars looked like any other tourist, wearing a bright yellow t-shirt, blue shorts, and carrying a heavy hiking backpack. Dr. Kostov later recalled that Lars seemed restless and nervous, but coherent. They talked for several minutes about his ear and the medication. Then, the mundane turned macabre. A construction worker, dressed in the high-visibility vest of the airport maintenance crew, entered the room to perform a routine check. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at Lars. But the sight of the man in uniform acted like a tripwire in Lars's brain. Lars stood up abruptly. His eyes widened, darting toward the door. The color drained from his face until his skin matched the white tile of the clinic. "I don't want to die here," Lars whispered. "I have to get out of here." "Lars, wait," Dr. Kostov started, but it was too late. What happened next is captured on the grainy, silent footage of Varna Airport's CCTV, video that has since been viewed millions of times by amateur sleuths and private investigators. Lars Mittank bolted from the doctor's office. He left everything behind: his wallet containing hundreds of euros, his passport, and his mobile phone. He didn't just walk. He ran with the desperate, lung-bursting speed of a man fleeing a predator. He burst through the terminal doors and into the bright, midday sun. The broad daylight was his only witness. He sprinted across the parking lot, weaving between taxis and buses. He didn't look back. There was no one chasing him on the footage, only the invisible terrors of his own mind. He reached the perimeter of the airport, a massive 8-foot-tall barbed wire fence. To an ordinary person, it was an impassable barrier. To Lars, it was the finish line. In one fluid, adrenaline-fueled motion, he scaled the fence, his yellow shirt snagging momentarily on the wire before he dropped down on the other side. Beyond the fence lay the Aksakovo region, a dense, sprawling meadow of sunflowers and thick forest. Lars Mittank stepped into the tall weeds. The yellow of his shirt blended with the yellow of the sunflowers. And then he was gone. The search began almost immediately, but it was as if the earth had opened and swallowed him whole. The Bulgarian police, aided by German investigators and thermal imaging drones, combed every square inch of the forest. They found nothing. No torn fabric from his yellow shirt, no footprints in the dirt, no remains. How does a man vanish in an open field in the middle of the day, with no resources and an agonizing ear injury? The theories began to swirl like a dark fog. Some suggested a drug-induced psychosis, a rare side effect of the antibiotic cefuroxime. Others whispered about the Bulgarian organ mafia, suggesting Lars had been targeted for his healthy physique. His mother, heartbroken and relentless, hired a private investigator who spent years tracking leads across Europe, but every trail ended in a cul-de-sac. The most terrifying aspect of the Lars Mittank case isn't the possibility of a crime. It's the lack of one. The footage of Lars running remains one of the most unsettling things on the internet. It is the visual record of a man losing his soul to fear. In the video, he doesn't look like a criminal or a victim. He looks like a man who has seen something no one else can see. For over a decade, sightings have been reported. A truck driver in Brazil claimed to have seen a man matching Lars's description walking aimlessly along a highway. A homeless man in Dusseldorf was photographed looking remarkably like an aged Lars. Each lead was a spark of hope that was quickly extinguished by DNA tests or lack of evidence. If you go to Varna today, the airport looks much the same. The sun still beats down on the sunflowers in the fields beyond the fence. Travelers still rush to their gates, complaining about delays or lost luggage. But for the family of Lars Mittank, time stopped on that Tuesday in 2014. To them, the bright, sunny weather is a mockery. We are taught to fear the dark, the alleyways at midnight, the shadows in the corner of the room. We feel safe in the light. Lars Mittank proved that the light offers no protection. You can be surrounded by people under the gaze of a dozen cameras in the peak of the afternoon heat and still be erased. He didn't leave a note. He didn't leave a body. He left only a yellow blur on a security tape, a permanent reminder that sometimes the things we are running from aren't behind us. They are inside us. To this day, Lars Mittank is officially listed as a missing person. His mother still maintains a Facebook page dedicated to finding him, posting photos of what he might look like today. Older, perhaps bearded, perhaps scarred. The sunflowers in Varna bloom and die every year. They stand tall, soaking up the Bulgarian sun, masking whatever secrets lie in the soil beneath them. Somewhere in those woods, or perhaps thousands of miles away under a different name, is the answer. Until then, Lars Mittank remains the man who ran into the daylight and never came out.
The Mary Celeste, the Ghost Ship Mystery. December 5, 1872. In the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a ship named Dei Grazia sailed through the fog near the Azores Islands. The crew noticed something strange on the horizon. Another ship. It was drifting slowly, almost silently. Its sails were open, but something felt wrong. No one stood on the deck. No sailors adjusted the ropes. No captain steered the wheel. Just an empty ship moving across the ocean. The name written on the side of the vessel was Mary Celeste. And what the sailors discovered on that ship would become one of the most terrifying maritime mysteries in history. The story of the Mary Celeste began almost a month earlier. On November 7, 1872, the ship left New York Harbor on a routine trading voyage. The captain of the ship was Benjamin Spooner Briggs, an experienced and respected sailor. Briggs was known for his calm personality and strong leadership. This voyage was special for another reason. For the first time, Captain Briggs brought his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia along with him. The rest of the crew consisted of 7 skilled sailors, all experienced at sea. Their destination was Genoa, Italy. The ship carried a cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. Everything about the voyage seemed completely normal. The ship was in excellent condition. The weather was good, and the crew was experienced. No one could imagine that within a few weeks, every single person aboard would disappear. On December 5th, the Dei Grazia spotted the Mary Celeste drifting in the ocean. At first, the captain thought the ship might be having trouble. But as they watched more closely, something became clear. The ship was sailing strangely. It moved with the wind but seemed out of control. Captain David Morehouse decided to investigate. He ordered several crew members to board the mysterious vessel. As their small boat approached the Mary Celeste, a strange silence filled the air. The ship looked perfectly normal, but there was no sign of life. When the sailors climbed onto the deck, they realized something was terribly wrong. The ship was completely abandoned. The boarding crew searched the entire ship. Cabins, storage rooms, decks, the captain's quarters. But there was no one there. The crew had vanished. But the strangest part was that the ship itself was still in good condition. The cargo was untouched. Food supplies were still stored in the kitchen. Fresh water was still available. Personal belongings were still inside the cabins. Even the captain's documents and valuables were left behind. Nothing suggested a violent attack. There were no signs of struggle. No blood. No broken furniture. The only thing missing was the lifeboat. It appeared that the crew had left the ship using the small emergency boat. But why? The Mary Celeste was still perfectly capable of sailing. There was no clear reason to abandon it. Investigators then examined the ship's logbook. This book recorded important events during the voyage. The final entry was written 10 days earlier. The ship had been sailing normally near the Azores. After that, nothing. No explanation. No warning. Just silence. Whatever happened on the Mary Celeste happened suddenly, and the crew never had the chance to record it. Over the years, investigators have proposed many theories. Some believed the cargo of industrial alcohol created dangerous fumes. Perhaps the crew feared a massive explosion. If they smelled the fumes or heard a loud blast, they might have panicked and temporarily abandoned the ship. But if the lifeboat drifted away or the rope connecting it broke, the crew would have been left stranded in the ocean. Another theory suggests a rogue wave or violent waterspout frightened the crew. The ocean can be unpredictable. Even experienced sailors sometimes make desperate decisions. Others believed pirates attacked the ship. But this theory quickly fell apart. Nothing had been stolen. The cargo remained untouched. Valuable items were still inside the cabins. Some people even suggested mutiny or crime. But Captain Briggs was respected by his crew. And again, there was no evidence of violence, because no theory fully explained the mystery. The legend of the Mary Celeste only grew darker. News of the mysterious ship spread across the world. Newspapers called it the greatest maritime mystery. People began to imagine darker explanations. Some believed the ship was cursed. Others believed supernatural forces were responsible. Stories of ghost ships had always existed among sailors. But the Mary Celeste felt different, because this mystery was real. A ship discovered in the middle of the ocean, perfectly intact, yet completely empty. More than 150 years later, the truth is still unknown. No bodies were ever discovered. No survivor ever appeared. No final message explained what happened. Captain Briggs, his wife, their small daughter, and 7 sailors simply vanished from history. The Mary Celeste continued drifting alone across the Atlantic, the silent ship, carrying one of the ocean's greatest mysteries. And perhaps somewhere beneath those dark waters, the ocean still hides the answer. #The shadow over the grove, the Hinterkaifeck mystery. 600 meters from the small Bavarian village of Grobern sat a lonely farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. In the spring of 1922, this wasn't just a place of labor, it was a place of deep, suffocating secrets. The farm was a Einadhof, a secluded homestead, hidden behind a thicket of trees known as the Koppenwall Wood. For the residents of Grobern, Hinterkaifeck was a dark spot on the map. It was a place people avoided after sunset. By April 4, 1922, the farm would become more than just a local curiosity. It would become the site of a crime so inexplicable, so brutal, and so psychologically disturbing that it remains the most famous cold case in German history. This is the story of 6 lives ended by a phantom, and a killer who didn't just strike and flee, but moved in to live with the dead. To understand the horror, we have to understand the family. The Grubers were not beloved. The patriarch, 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, was a man described by neighbors as morose, stingy, and aggressive. He was a loner who lived for his land and little else. His wife, Kazilia, 72, was a woman who seemed hollowed out by years of hard labor and a marriage that many rumored to be abusive. Then there was their daughter, Victoria Gabriel. At 35, Victoria was a widow. Her husband, Karl, had reportedly been killed in the trenches of World War I in 1914. Victoria was the family's only bridge to the village, possessing a beautiful soprano voice that she lent to the church choir. But even her grace was tainted by scandal. The village was rife with rumors that Andreas and Victoria shared an incestuous relationship, a claim bolstered by the fact that Andreas had served time in prison for incestuous indecency years prior. Finally, there were the children, 7-year-old Kazilia, a quiet girl, and 2-year-old Joseph. The paternity of little Joseph was a source of constant vitriol in the town. Some said he was the son of a neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Others whispered that he was the product of the dark secret between Andreas and his daughter. This was the powder keg of Hinterkaifeck, a family isolated by geography, by social shunning, and by their own internal demons. The mystery of the murders doesn't begin on the night of the crime, but 6 months earlier. In late 1921, the family's previous maid suddenly packed her bags and left. She didn't leave because of the low pay or the grueling work. She left because she was convinced the farm was haunted. She told the villagers she heard footsteps in the attic when the house was empty. She felt eyes on her in the barn. She spoke of a presence that made the very air feel cold. Andreas, a man of cold logic and sharp edges, dismissed her as a hysterical woman. But by March 1922, even the hardened Andreas couldn't ignore the reality that something was closing in on them. In the days leading up to the massacre, a series of glitches occurred in the daily life of the farm. 1. The newspaper Andreas found a Munich newspaper on the porch. No one in the house had bought it and the postman hadn't delivered it. It was a paper from a distant city, left like a calling card. 2. The footprints after a light dusting of snow, Andreas discovered a trail of footprints leading from the woods straight to the machine shed. He followed them, expecting to find a thief. But the tracks stopped at the door and to his horror there were no return tracks. Someone had entered the farm but they had never left. 3. The keys the family's set of house keys vanished. Andreas searched everywhere, growing increasingly paranoid, but they were never found. 4. The scratches asterisk he discovered deep, fresh scratches on the lock of the tool shed, as if someone had tried to force it open with a crude tool. On the night of March 30th, Andreas told his neighbor Lorenz Schlittenbauer about these events. Lorenz offered him a firearm for protection. Andreas, in his typical stubborn fashion, refused. He believed he could handle whatever was hiding in his woods. He was wrong. On Friday, March 31, 1922, a new maid named Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm. Maria was 44 years old, and her arrival was a somber affair. She had been reluctant to take the job because of the farm's reputation, but she needed the work. Her sister dropped her off that afternoon, helped her carry her bags to the small maid's quarters and said goodbye. Maria had been on the property for less than 6 hours when the sun went down. She was still unpacking her few belongings when the ghost Andreas had feared finally emerged from the shadows. We can only reconstruct the events of that Friday night through the forensic lens of the Munich police. It began in the barn. Historians believe that one by one the family members were lured out of the house. Perhaps the killer made a noise in the stable, or perhaps a cow had been untethered. Andreas was the first to investigate. As he stepped into the darkness of the barn, he was met not by a thief, but by a shadow holding a roothaw, a heavy cross-shaped mattock used for clearing roots and tilling soil. The blow was vertical and devastating. Andreas was struck in the temple, his skull shattered. Next came the women. It is believed that Kazilia and Victoria went to look for Andreas when he didn't return. They walked into a kill zone. The attacker was efficient and possessed terrifying strength. The elderly Kazilia was struck several times. Forensic reports later showed she had been strangled as well. Victoria suffered 9 separate blows to the head. The most heart-wrenching victim was the 7-year-old little Kazilia. She was lured into the barn to find her mother and grandparents, only to witness the carnage. She was struck down, but she did not die instantly. The autopsy later revealed that she survived for several hours in the hay, surrounded by the bodies of her family. In her state of shock and agony, she had torn out clumps of her own hair. With the 4 adults and the eldest child dead or dying in the barn, the killer turned his attention to the house. He walked through the kitchen and into the maid's room. Maria Baumgartner, the woman who had arrived only hours before, never had a chance. She was killed where she stood. Finally, the killer entered the nursery. He approached the bassinet of 2-year-old Joseph. With a coldness that defies human understanding, he swung the mattock into the crib. The family was gone. This is the point where the Hinterkaifeck story shifts from a murder mystery to a psychological nightmare. In most crimes, the perpetrator flees the scene immediately. But for the next 4 days, from Friday night until Tuesday afternoon, the killer stayed at the farm. In most crimes, the perpetrator flees the scene immediately. But for the next 4 days, from Friday night until Tuesday afternoon, the killer stayed at the farm. Imagine the scene. 6 corpses lay cooling in the barn in the house, and in the kitchen the killer was frying eggs. Neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney all through the weekend. The cattle were not left to starve. Someone fed them. Someone milked the cows. Someone even tied up the family dog, which had been barking, and provided it with food. On Saturday, when young Kazilia didn't show up for school, the village didn't panic. It was a farm and children were often kept home for chores. On Sunday, when the family missed church, people noticed, but the Grubers were reclusive anyway. During these 4 days, the killer was a ghost in the machine. He slept in their beds. He ate their food. He sat in the silence of the Bavarian woods, surrounded by the literal fruits of his slaughter. What? Was he looking for something? Was he savoring his victory? Or was he simply a man with nowhere else to go? The silence finally broke on Tuesday, April 4th. A repairman named Michael Pohl had been scheduled to fix a stationary engine on the farm. He arrived and knocked, but no one answered. He stayed for nearly 5 hours, completing his work in the yard and the barn. He noted the eerie silence, the locked doors, and the fact that the dog was tied up and barking hoarsely. When Pohl returned to the village and mentioned the strange atmosphere, a search party was finally formed. Lorenz Schlittenbauer and 2 other men walked the 600 meters to the farmstead. They entered the barn first. They began moving piles of hay and stumbled upon a door that had been laid flat on the ground. When they lifted it, the horror was revealed. A stack of bodies, Andreas, the 2 Kazilias and Victoria, all matted with blood and hay. Schlittenbauer, in a move that would later make him a prime suspect, didn't wait for the police. He broke into the house, screaming for his son Joseph. He found the maid in her room and the toddler in his crib. The village of Grobern was shattered. The police from Munich were called, but by the time they arrived, the scene had been trampled by dozens of curious onlookers. The investigation was a disaster from the start, but nothing could prepare the detectives for the autopsies. They discovered that the heads of the victims were missing, sent to Munich for study by psychic investigators, and that the weapon was a tool Andreas himself had owned. The killer hadn't brought a weapon. He had used the family's own tools to end them. When the Munich police, the Mord Commission, arrived at Hinterkaifeck on April 5, 1922, they stepped into a crime scene that looked like a fever dream. The air was thick with the smell of livestock and decay. Because the killer had lived in the house for days after the murders, the freshness of the evidence was gone. The lead investigator, George Reingruber, was a seasoned detective, but even he was baffled. The first thing that struck him was the organization of the bodies. In the barn, the 4 victims had been stacked neatly and covered with hay and an old door. In the house, Maria Baumgartner's body was covered with a bedsheet, and little Joseph's crib was covered with one of his mother's dresses. This wasn't a hit-and-run robbery. This was a personal, methodical clearing of a household. The forensics of 1922 were primitive, but the results were chilling. The court physician, Dr. Johann Baptist Aumler, performed the autopsies on a makeshift table in the farmyard. He determined that the weapon was a Ruthal, a pickaxe-like tool. The precision of the strike suggested a killer who was either incredibly strong or very familiar with the tool. But the most disturbing discovery was the fate of young Kazilia. The medical report suggested she had remained alive for 2 to 3 hours after being struck, lying in the dark barn next to the corpses of her mother and grandparents, literally tearing her own hair out in a state of terminal shock. In a bizarre twist that sounds like something out of a horror movie, the victims' heads were removed and sent to Munich. The police were so desperate that they gave the skulls to clairvoyants and psychic detectives, hoping they could see the killer's face in the bone. The skulls were later lost during the chaos of World War II, meaning the victims were eventually buried in a local cemetery without their heads. The first name on everyone's lips was Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Lorenz was a local farmer who had been romantically involved with Victoria Gabriel after her husband died. He was the presumed father of little Joseph, though he had avoided paying child support. The case against him was circumstantial but heavy. The behavior at the scene: when the search party arrived, Lorenz was the first to break into the house. While the other men were paralyzed with fear, Lorenz reportedly walked through the dark rooms with ease. The key: remember the missing house keys from part 1. Some believed Lorenz had them. The motive: he had a volatile relationship with Andreas Gruber, who had once accused him of incestuous behavior with Victoria. The disturbed evidence: after finding the bodies, Lorenz began moving them before the police arrived. Was he looking for something? Or was he arranging the scene? Despite being questioned repeatedly, Lorenz was never charged. He spent the rest of his life filing defamation lawsuits against neighbors who called him a murderer, eventually dying in 1941, still under a cloud of suspicion. The most cinematic theory in the Hinterkaifeck mystery is the return of the dead husband. Victoria's husband, Karl Gabriel, had reportedly been killed by a shell in the trenches of France in 1914. His body was never recovered. In the aftermath of the murders, several soldiers from Karl's regiment came forward with a terrifying claim. They whispered that Karl hadn't died, he had been captured or he had deserted, and had spent years in a Russian POW camp. The theory suggests that Karl returned to Bavaria only to find his wife had given birth to another man's child, Joseph, and was living in a house of sin with her father. Driven by a vengeful rage, the dead soldier used his military training to infiltrate the farm, live in the attic, and systematically execute the family that had replaced him. While most historians dismissed this, some villagers swore they saw a man in a tattered military uniform lurking in the woods in the days before the massacre. Because the 1920s were a time of great economic upheaval in Germany, many wandering laborers moved through the countryside. The police investigated over 100 suspects. 2 brothers, Anton and Karl Thurnbach, were heavily scrutinized. Anton had allegedly made a comment to a co-worker months prior, saying that the Gruber family should be killed. However, no physical evidence ever linked them to the farm. Others believed it was a botched robbery. Andreas Gruber was known to keep large sums of cash on the property. However, when the police searched the house, they found thousands of marks in cash and expensive jewelry left untouched. The killer hadn't come for money. He had come for blood. Why couldn't the finest detectives in Munich solve this? The contamination. By the time the police arrived, the farm had been cleaned by the killer and then trampled by the village. The attic. When investigators finally climbed into the attic, They found the floor covered in hay to muffle footsteps. They also found 2 indentations in the hay where someone had been sleeping, and roof tiles that had been shifted so the ghost could watch the yard. The killer had been living right above their heads for days, maybe weeks. The silence of the village, the people of Groburn and Kafek were tight-lipped. They knew the Gruber's secrets, but they didn't like the police. Many details were likely taken to the grave by neighbors who knew more than they let on. In 1923, a year after the murders, the farmstead of Hinterkaifeck was completely demolished. The neighbors couldn't stand the sight of it anymore. As the workers tore down the walls, they found the final piece of the puzzle, the Ruthaw, the murder weapon, hidden in the attic floorboards. It had been there the whole time, tucked away by the killer before he finally decided to leave his new home. Today, nothing remains of the farm but a small stone memorial in the middle of an open field. The woods have encroached on the land and the Koppen wall still stands dark and silent. The Hinterkaifeck murders endure because they tap into our deepest fears. It's not just the violence, it's the intrusion. It's the idea that while you are eating dinner, someone is in your attic. While you are sleeping, someone is watching you through a gap in the ceiling. While you think you are alone in your isolated home, you are actually sharing it with your executioner. In 2007, students at the Furstenfeldbruck Police Academy used modern criminalistic techniques to re-examine the case. They reached a conclusion on who the killer was, but out of respect for the descendants of the suspects who are still alive, they refused to name him publicly. The name of the man who held the pickaxe remains a secret, buried in the dark soil of Bavaria. Hinterkaifeck is no longer a farm. It is a ghost story that reminds us that sometimes, the footprints in the snow only lead one way.
The Dyatlov Pass Incident. The wind howled like a living thing across the frozen slopes of the Ural Mountains. It wasn't just cold, it was a kind of cold that crept into the bones, a cold that silenced thoughts and numbed the will to survive. In the winter of 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out on an expedition into this unforgiving wilderness. They were young, strong, and trained to endure the harshest conditions nature could throw at them. They had maps, equipment, and confidence. What they didn't have was any idea that they were walking toward one of the most mysterious tragedies in human history. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student known for his intelligence, discipline, and leadership. His team consisted of fellow students and graduates, each one skilled in skiing, survival, and mountaineering. This was not a reckless adventure. It was a carefully planned journey, a test of endurance meant to earn them top-level certification in trekking. Their destination was a remote mountain in the northern Urals, a place known to the local Monsey people as Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. The name should have been a warning. The expedition began smoothly. Spirits were high. The group joked, sang, and documented their journey with photographs and diary entries. Snow covered the landscape like an endless white ocean, broken only by dark lines of trees and jagged ridges. The hikers moved steadily, pulling their gear on sleds, carving paths through deep drifts. Each night, they set up camp, cooked simple meals, and rested in their shared tent, a long canvas structure designed to hold all 9 of them. But as they pushed deeper into the mountains, conditions worsened. The wind grew stronger, the temperature dropped further, and visibility became unpredictable. On January 31st, they reached the edge of a highland area leading toward their final ascent. It was here that things began to shift, subtly at first, almost unnoticed. The next day, February 1st, they attempted to cross the mountain slope. But poor weather and strong winds forced them off course. Instead of descending into a safer, forested valley, they made a decision that would prove fatal. They set up camp on the exposed slope of Kholat Syakhl itself. It was a strange choice. Experienced hikers usually avoid camping on open slopes, especially in extreme weather. The forest below offered shelter from the wind, firewood, and better protection. Yet for reasons still debated, they chose to stay where they were. Perhaps they didn't want to lose altitude. Perhaps they believed they could manage. Or perhaps, something else influenced that decision. They pitched their tent on the incline, anchoring it into the snow. Inside, they laid out their gear, removed their outer layers, and prepared for the night. The wind outside screamed across the mountain. The darkness closed in. And then, something happened. No one knows exactly what it was. But sometime during the night, all 9 hikers suddenly fled their tent. Not through the entrance, but by cutting their way out from the inside. The canvas was slashed open. From within. It was not a careful exit. It was a desperate escape. They left behind their boots, their coats, their supplies. They ran into the freezing night, barefoot, half-dressed, into temperatures that could kill within minutes. Why? What could have terrified them so completely that they would abandon safety and run into certain death? Days turned into weeks before a search party was organized. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, concern began to grow. Eventually, rescuers set out to retrace their path. What they found would only deepen the mystery. The tent was discovered first. It was partially buried in snow, still standing, but damaged. The investigators noted that it had been cut open from the inside. Inside, everything was left behind as if the occupants had vanished in an instant. Shoes were neatly placed. Clothes remained folded. Food and personal belongings were untouched. It didn't look like a normal evacuation. It looked like panic. Following the trail away from the tent, the searchers found footprints in the snow. Bare feet. Socks. A single boot here and there. The prints led downhill, toward the forest. But there was something strange about them. They weren't chaotic. They weren't the marks of people running for their lives. They were calm. Measured. As if the group had walked away, not fled. This contradiction would haunt the investigation. The first bodies were found near a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest. 2 hikers lay there, barefoot, wearing only undergarments. Their skin was burned and torn, their hands injured as if they had tried to climb the tree. Nearby, remnants of a small fire suggested they had attempted to survive the cold. Between the tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were discovered. These individuals appeared to have been trying to return to the tent. Their positions, frozen mid-movement, told a silent story of desperation. They had turned back, perhaps realizing the danger, but they never made it. The remaining 4 hikers were not found until months later, buried under deep snow in a ravine further into the forest. Their condition was far more disturbing. These bodies showed severe internal injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, yet there were no external wounds to match the force required. It was as if an immense pressure had been applied from within. One woman was missing her tongue. Others had missing eyes. Some clothing showed traces of radiation. It didn't make sense. The official investigation struggled to provide answers. There were no signs of a struggle. No evidence of an attack by another group. No indication of an avalanche large enough to explain the behavior. The injuries didn't match typical survival scenarios. In the end, the case was closed with a vague conclusion. The cause of death was an unknown compelling force. It was a phrase that explained nothing. And so, the theories began. Some believed it was an avalanche, that a sudden movement of snow had frightened the hikers, causing them to cut their way out and flee. But the slope angle was not steep enough for a typical avalanche. The tent was still partially intact. And the footprints remained visible, undisturbed. Others suggested infrasound, a phenomenon where wind passing over certain shapes can create low-frequency vibrations that affect the human mind. It could cause panic, anxiety, even hallucinations. Perhaps the hikers experienced an overwhelming sense of dread, forcing them to abandon their shelter. There were theories of secret military tests. The presence of radiation fueled speculation that experimental weapons had been tested in the area. Strange lights were reportedly seen in the sky around that time. Could the hikers have witnessed something they weren't supposed to see? And then there were the darker theories. Something unknown. Something not of this world. Something that moved silently through the snow, unseen but powerful. But there was never any proof. In 2020, Russian authorities reopened the case and concluded that an avalanche was the most likely explanation. A small slab of snow, they said, could have shifted under the tent, creating the impression of imminent danger. The hikers, fearing a larger collapse, cut their way out and retreated. Disoriented in the darkness and cold, they succumbed to hypothermia and injury. It was a logical explanation. But not everyone was convinced. Because even with this conclusion, the questions remain. Why didn't they return to the tent once the danger passed? Why were some injuries so severe? Why was there radiation? Why did they leave so calmly, yet die so violently? The Dyatlov Pass incident is more than a tragedy. It is a puzzle frozen in time. A moment where logic fails and mystery takes hold. 9 lives ended on that mountain. Their final moments are lost to the wind, buried beneath layers of snow and silence. And somewhere in the endless white of Kolat cycle, the truth still waits.